I have two sessions today. One is the power talk, which is right now, and then I have a masterclass at 4, which is where I'll be speaking about this topic in depth. So when they asked me to speak, one of the most fundamental areas I thought would be relevant to this conversation was about tech diplomacy. Because the last almost 7 years now, I've been a diplomat, I've been working in multilateral diplomacy, an area that is now recognized as the driving force of growth, not just for India, but across the world. And in the special case of India, couple years back when we were still in a nascent stage, when we were taking orders from world powers, especially from the US or from Russia or from all of these major countries, India was taking orders. India was always listening to other world leaders, to world powers, what they had to say about us. But today we are in a position that we can say what to do, that we can give a tit for tat in the diplomatic community. With the recent standoff with Canada, that is something that you might have witnessed, right? India did not take no for an answer. India stood up for itself. And that ability to stand up for itself, it is coming from a large reason for that is because of India's innovation, India's technology. The concept of Huddle and events like this is to essentially nurture that startup ecosystem. This startup ecosystem, this technology, this innovative culture that India has created, that has largely contributed to this concept of making India a world power. So back in the 60s and 70s, when India became independent, a lot of people always say that, we fought for our independence. If you go down the history trajectory, my friends, the British left us because they were pretty much bankrupt by the end of World War II and not enough capable to lead another country under their dominion. So that's the reason why they left us. And you know what they said? All of these so-called first world nations, when they left us, they felt that by 60s or 70s, all the princely states would have fought again and they would have split. So from there to having nurtured ourselves as a world leader, we have come a long way. And India's growth story towards being a world power is not determined by our nuclear arsenal. Previously, to become a world power, you had to either win the space wars, be the first to do something in space, or build a nuclear arsenal so that you can scare the shit out of someone. That's what world powers have been doing, like literally. And in the specific case of India, our growth story of becoming a world power is because of our knowledge arsenal, our knowledge, our technology, our innovation, our startup ecosystem. So the bigger perspective here, the bigger picture here is that India or our country today, events like these are not just nurturing a startup ecosystem. They're not just helping prospective startups meet investors. They're adding to the India growth story. They're adding to the Indian dream. I mean, a lot of you today, all those who are startups, all those who are students, I'm sure you always had a dream of going abroad and settling, going to the US and settling, going to the UK and settling. The great American dream was essentially that, right? People wanted to go to the US and start earning there in dollars, buy a house there because the land was much, much more than India, hence it was cheaper. So there was always an American dream people had. Today that dialogue has changed. It's the Indian dream that we are all contributing to. So it was only fair on my part to be able to represent the government, the central government, the doctrine of diplomacy that we are currently talking of. It's the Narendra Modi and S. Jaishankar doctrine of diplomacy, something that has really helped us carve a space in the entrepreneurship sector, in being the global thought leader of innovation in this entire space. And that I feel is transformational. And I'm not saying this out of a political bias or out of having worked with the government. I'm saying this because I've noticed this firsthand. I was part of G20. The kind of respect that India gets abroad, the kind of diplomatic appreciation India gets abroad, that is fundamental, that is unprecedented. And I think this is the perfect time for all of you here today to be a part of this growth story, to be a part of the Indian dream. because only then we can truly develop something that will make our country reach the kind of heights that we want it to go. So that is where I feel that there is a lot that requires to be done. One of the major agendas of the G20 this time was making India the voice of the global south. A terminology I'm sure all of you read in the Times of India or the Economic Times or all of these publications or television channels, the voice of the global south. So what exactly is this? When we refer to the global south, we talk of the southern hemisphere, which comprises of two major continents. That's the African Union and the South American continent. In addition to that, we have the Southeast Asia, the ASEAN nations, the SAARC nations, the BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical Cooperation. So we have all of these countries that are largely underdeveloped or developing. And the funny thing is, I represent the UN, but I shouldn't be saying this, but I don't give a damn. The UN today has become kind of an organization with existential crisis. And I think I'm not saying this in my capacity as a diplomat, I'm saying this in the capacity of a human being. The Security Council, for instance, right? I'm sure a lot of you follow geopolitics or international relations. So you do realize the Security Council has been dominated by P5, 5 permanent members of the Security Council. That includes USA, UK, France, Russia, and China. Now, if you talk of the two major leaders that always have a voice in the Security Council, that's USA and France, probably the largest defense manufacturers in the world. Now tell me something, why will the biggest defense manufacturers, defense contractors in the world will want world peace, will want the world to be secure when their entire business runs out of the business of war, if I may put it that way? So at the UN headquarters in New York, there is a board in the very ground floor that gives you a real-time figure of the daily military expenditure. You know the number that it represents? It's around $3,000 trillion. That's the world's daily military expenditure. So the question is, what if this money was being used for development? What if this money was being used to solve developmental issues, to solve innovation, to fund startups, to change, to cause this essential disruption that we talk of? So that's where I feel there is a whole lot of work that needs to be done. So when we were having a discussion, I think someone just asked me this morning, this very phrase, voice of the global south, how did it come about? Because, and one of the journalists here said that, we have been hearing global south for a while, but India is in the northern hemisphere. So how is it that we are claiming ourselves to be voice of the global south? That's because largely in the northern hemisphere, development has been portrayed by nuclear wars, with all the wars that are happening, the Israel-Hamas confrontation right now, or the Russia-Ukraine wars. All of these have been, the northern hemisphere, development has been defined by power games between world leaders. But right now, India is being a voice for the voiceless. Our model of diplomacy is about bringing technology at the forefront, about trying to solve world challenges, about trying to solve for what we call as sustainable development goals, and trying to essentially bring representation on the international diaspora within the framework of diplomacy. So that's what India is currently batting for. We have been able to consolidate the African Union as part of the G20, one of the milestones of the G20 that happened. Again, South America, we have been providing them with a platform for diplomacy. So if you look at South American countries, you look at Latin America, Central Americas, it's actually funny. A lot of these diplomats have been my friends, and they don't have a framework of foreign services or civil services. Most of the people who become diplomats there, they come up through corporate roles. So the thing is, these countries never had a diplomatic voice, didn't have a diplomatic strategy. And India is providing for that. India is building up the entire southern hemisphere of the world. We are consolidating it. And we have shown it in a lot of great ways. All through the pandemic, India became a voice for world peace. India became a voice for providing solutions to combat the pandemic. We were called the pharmacy of the world. One of the major milestones during the COVID pandemic was India's pharma industry, which was our biggest strength. We were able to provide medicines, especially remdesivir and tocilizumab, the two most talked about drugs on WhatsApp University. They were being provided by India to most of the global south, the entire southern hemisphere. Similarly, when we talk of vaccine diplomacy was one of our major agendas. We provided for half of the world through innovative methodologies. We made sure that everyone had access to Covaxin and Covishield, because large part of these countries do not have a vaccine industry. So India has been able to provide for. Our model of diplomacy is that we have always been upfront in trying to help others, in trying to solve for global challenges. So I feel this is the time that all of you should be part of this growth story in whichever way you can, whether it's as a startup, whether it's as an industry professional, whether as a governance professional. It is time to contribute to the Indian dream, because it's no longer the American dream or the Canadian dream. I mean, with Canada, which was probably the most sought after place for immigration, they say the capital of Punjab is Canada, right? So half of these people migrating to Canada from India, you know the kind of situations that are up there in Canada right now. And not just on a diplomatic level, on a human level, right? So with all of these things happening, I think India is truly claiming its space in the global diaspora as not just a voice of global south, but as a voice for diplomacy, a voice for growth, a voice for innovation, and a whole lot of these things. So that's where I feel we need to work on. There are a couple areas that I always felt where the Western media has always been trying to take an upper hand. For instance, the Olympics. All my dear friends here, you have all been witness to different Olympics, right? The Olympics, Rio Olympics and Tokyo Olympics. When Rio Olympics happened, we didn't win a gold medal that year, right, in 2016. So what did the world media say? A country of 1.25 billion people and cannot make a single gold medal for the Olympics. Similarly, then we had the Tokyo Olympics, and our boy Neeraj Chopra got a gold medal. And then the Western media wrote, and this is on the very first page of Google for all of you to see, that a country of 1.40 billion people and still just one gold medal. Because that was never our core competency. Our core competency have been our gray cells. You look at the Olympics of the brain, the International Physics Olympiad, Chemistry Olympiad, Bio Olympiad, Maths Olympiad. In the last 500-year history, there has been an Indian kid winning a gold medal at the Olympiads. But the Western media won't highlight that. So our belief system, our value system is largely dominated by the Western media, how they approach us, how they try and showcase India. The National Spell Bee, I'm sure you all are aware of it, right? The National Spell Bee that happens in the US. For the last 1,000 years, if I can remember, there has been an Indian kid of 7 or 8 year olds that who have been defeating an American of 16, 17, and 18. So that has been our core competency. And I think that is where India needs to try and shine. There's a reason why there is an Indian CEO at every top Silicon Valley company. Silicon Valley, the global headquarters of tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, everything that Huddle is talking about today. I'm sure a lot of you have been to Silicon Valley as well. There is a reason why there is a Sundar Pichai at Google, a Satya Nadella at Microsoft, a Shiv Nadar at HCL, a V. Narasimhan at Novartis, a Lakshman Narasimhan at Starbucks, a Shantanu Narayan at Adobe. All of these people, IBM, Arvind Krishnan, including a website that not a lot of people here might want to see, OnlyFans. Even the CEO of OnlyFans was an Indian woman, Amrapali Gan. So the good thing here is that there has always been an Indian at a top position. And that is India's soft power. And people used to say that was a soft power, but I'd say it's actually our hard power. It's our tech diplomacy that is making India shine today. And this is the time to jump on the bandwagon. There are incredible opportunities that await us with all these companies. They showed a small video of Apple in here. So in my career, before the UN, I was a private sector employee. I was a computer science engineer, so obviously I had to work in the tech industry. So after my regular stint of trying to work for Infosys or TCS, I figured out that I had to do better. So I started coding more and eventually landed a gig at Google, thereafter at Apple. So while at Apple, this was a time when, in the middle of the last decade, when there was not a lot of Indians having representation at Apple. People had heard of a lot of Indians wanting to join Google, and also Google was very active in campus placements. But again, Apple was a very pro-American company. The top 100 people were all Americans. So to be able to be there and try and give them a glimpse of India, and Apple, as they say, is one of the most capitalistic companies on the planet. So the only objective they gave me while I was a product manager was to sell more iPads. Obviously, with that, I realized that we have one of the greatest developer pools. Every individual in India knows coding. Compare them to their US or UK counterpart. How many people know Java or Python or Swift or Node.js? So India had a great coding talent, and I thought this is the perfect platform to showcase that. So obviously, we went around discussing that with the leadership and went around developing an entire roadmap for it. So there was a program I launched. It was called Everyone Can Code in 2016. The idea behind Everyone Can Code was essentially to help more Indians start coding on the Swift platform, because Indians were anyhow coding so much. So Swift is the coding language for iOS, watchOS, macOS, tvOS. So we launched an app under that called Swift Playgrounds. By 2023, though I've left the company, there have been over 100 million Swift Playground downloads, and more than 120 million Indians who actually use it to code on Swift. And that did reflect in the way iPads were sold, which was the primary mandate for Apple. But in that process, we helped develop an Apple developer community in India. People had always heard of Google developer groups, Google business groups, all of that. But Apple coding was still very nascent in India. So we helped develop that, and that's when they came to say that, oh, you have done something, and that's when they recognized me. So the video you saw was my desire to bring India onto one global platform. And in this instance, it was Apple. So that's where I feel, my dear friends, that we all have an opportunity. We just need to spot the gray area where we can try and pitch for India, bat for India, because that's where the world is looking right now. And with that, Apple has not just launched the retail vertical at BKC and in Saket in Delhi, but in addition to that, they are also, so with iPhone 15, you have all been seeing manufactured, designed by Apple in California, assembled in India instead of assembled in China. So that's one major move that has happened. So with very small roles, I am a nobody, but with a very small approach to bring more coders onto the Apple platform. I just recognized a small niche market, and that led to Apple taking interest in India and eventually recognizing India as a major partner. And with the COVID crisis, with China being probably the most rogue nations right now, Apple has decided to move away from China and bring its manufacturing here in India. So there have been a lot of interesting developments around it. The Kerala government reached out to us. We met the chief secretary. There's a pitch to bring an Apple store, a flagship Apple vertical in Trivandrum. So that's something that's shaping up. So there are interesting things. And all of this could happen because I realized that India is the next big thing. And I think that is exactly what the Modi and S. Jaishankar doctrine of diplomacy is all about. It's about putting India first. So try and make sure, whichever industry you are in, try and make sure that you build upon this India's intellectual property, India's tech diplomacy, and India's thought leadership, because India is the global epicenter, not just of innovation, but of thought leadership right now. And all of you, the literacy rate, I'm sitting in the most literate state of India right now, right? So I think this is something that you guys should realize more than anyone. Had I been speaking, giving this lecture in Haryana or maybe in Bihar, I would have had my reservations. But doing this in Kerala, I think you all recognize the importance that India has for providing thought leadership and innovation-based leadership. I mean, look at the examples historically. Bhagat Singh, a guy of 23 years who kissed the gallows on 23rd March 1931. Most people just, in today's terms, use him as a political figure on a poster, or just use him with reference to something very random these days, a symbol of aggression. There are debates where they say whether his act was that of a terrorism or patriotism. Above all that, he was a scholar. You look at his jail notebook, the kind of writings, the kind of intellectual growth he showed in the last year of his life. इस कदर वाकिफ है मेरी कलम मेरे जज्बातों से, मैं इश्क भी लिखना चाहूं तो इनकलाब लिखा जाता है. At 23 years of age, if a guy could say that, I think that is a fine example of India's thought leadership. Srinivas Ramanujan, another guy from very close by, Kumbakonam in Tamil Nadu, a guy who did not have enough money to buy a notebook for jotting down all the formulas he could. He was presented with a book by C.S. Gar. It was a 200-page book, a very small diary that was given to him. And with that single book, he could fundamentally figure out every form of present-day and futuristic mathematics that he could. So there's a domain called partitions in mathematics, for those of you who have had a science or a math background. You know, there was a man called Major McMahon at University of Cambridge, at the Great Trinity College, who was called the leader of combinatorics or partitions. So he would take 2 to 3 months. So partitions are the number of ways you can add up to a certain number, right? So for instance, P of 4, the partition of the number 4 is 5. There are 5 ways you can represent 4 or add up to the number 4. So one is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, one is 2 plus 1 plus 1, one is 2 plus 2, one is 3 plus 1, and one is the number 4. So there are 5 ways you can add up to the number 4. P of 4 is 5. But what if I wrote P of 3976? How many ways you can add up to the number 3976? Probably a billion ways, right? So there was a mathematician, Major McMahon, who would do it by painful rigor of hand. He would write it down for years and years and come up with the partition value. Srinivas Ramanujan, in 1 week, gave the partition formula, the Ramanujan-Hardy paradox, or the Ramanujan-Hardy partition formula. In less than 2% deviation could give you the partition value of any number whatsoever plugged into the formula. That is India's tech diplomacy, my friends. And with that, I leave you with these words. कि अब भी जिसका खून ना खौला खून नहीं वो पानी है, जो देश के काम ना है वो बेकार जवानी है. So all the very best. Have a great time at Huddle, and I hope this was really a power talk. Thank you so much.